Where'd Terrell go? Hey, I really appreciate that. I have no idea who he was talking about. When that guy gets here, y'all let me know. But I appreciate that, especially coming from someone like him who mirrors much of that. And I think our friendship was really developed because we had some really common interests in really trying to do things the right way. Do things around integrity, and I think that's important. Before I get started, I always give thanks to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because I got to give him credit for what this is. So I did it. If you're mad, go take it up with him. The other thing is that I also want to thank a few people here that I think are due. My business partner, Andre Rogers, is an incredible partner. We go back to college. So the reason we've been partners so long is I got a lot of pictures of him. He can't really leave from college. But when you go back somewhere, we're in college, we're realizing dreams when we were 19 and 18 years old, talking about starting a business one day. We went ahead and did our career. But to see that thing actually manifested, that there was some higher power sort of put that thing together. The other aspect that's important is, I won't say it's never happened, but I'll say it's very rare that at one point last year I just finished being the chair of the board for the DC Chamber of Commerce. So I'm still heavily involved with that. My partner, Andre Rogers, is the chair of the board with the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce. For about 6 months, we were both chairs of 2/3 of the region, and I was looking at Virginia hard. But that's an incredible, situation that I know Deborah Scott would say, if God's not involved with it, I don't know who is. Where literally two guys got together who started a business and at some point cared enough about their community to both be chairs of boards at the same time. I think Mr. Rogers and David have done a great job. I do want to applaud the Prince George's Chamber. If there are any, I always got to say, any folks, where are the staff? Are they here at all? Really, thank you guys so much for this. Two other quick thank you. Dan Sturdivant. I will always, if I'm in a room, Dan's going to get thanked. Dan, I met Dan, literally, Dan, we probably had like 2-3 people in the company, would you say? And, Dan looked at me and felt sorry for me and said, let me try to help you out, son. But we literally it was the best small business trip I've ever been on. Now, I happened to be going to St. Thomas, but they actually had a small business conference in St. Thomas. You know why that was so important? Guess what happened after 5 o'clock? I got to hang out with him. And I got to go meet some of the executives, and it was no longer, Antoine Ford, president of a little small business, and, Dan Sturdivant, critical person on the government side, or the other people I met. It was really Antoine and Dan. We got to really talk, and really that relationship was built. In every sense, if he's in the room, I'm going to thank him, because I think you want to be very careful not to forget anybody, because as you go up, you head down quickly. And at the end of the day, I don't want anybody ever to say we ever tripping. If we are, I need you guys to say, remember that time you told me, don't trip. Okay? And I really want to give also, just to thank you, and I really appreciate Deborah over here, because what she's done in her company and what she's done as a leader, particularly as a female leader in this environment. And I don't take that lightly of somebody that's doing what she's doing in a male-dominated environment. So I wish you guys give her a round of applause. Okay. Lisa Delaney Anderson, I almost call her because we go back to high school, even farther. But she has a great company. She's really helped us out. I want to thank those people that have been around me. Lisa, wave. Good. Great company, does a lot of accounting reporting. If you're in trouble in your small business, go see her right after this. Okay. So here's what I want to talk about a little bit today. I'm not going to talk most about Enlightened a lot. I'm really going to talk about something, and I'll tell you a little bit about us. And I said, ask Andre, is it okay that I talk about this, that says, what are some things that I wish somebody would have told me 15 years ago? Like before I started doing things, I'm like, why are you doing this? Because many of you, how many businesses have been in business for less than 5 years? Okay, good. There's a lot of things here that I just wish people would have told me. And we kind of thought through that, and Andre, we argue, and we're like, well, why didn't somebody tell us that? And that's the value of the relationships, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's very important to sort of listen to those things and learn from somebody else. Get your ego out of the way. If somebody has already made a mistake, say, thank you so much for making that mistake, and I do not want to make that mistake again. And so those are things. Oh, hey, Dina Nance, she's also a great company. She's helped us. Dina, raise your hand. Okay, thank you, Dina. So, if, you know, Dina's shy, but she's good. She does a lot of training. Go see her. Uh, but one of the things that you really want to look at is how do you learn from somebody else? So you guys should, if you're eating, take mental notes. If you got a notebook, take some notes. I think Deborah in her presentation, can they get a copy of that, by the way? They can? Okay, that'll be excellent because she gave extremely good advice. For those of you who don't know a little bit about Enlightened, we specialize in cybersecurity, software engineering, as well as management consulting. We are an 8A graduate. We graduated 5 years ago. 5 years ago. You can graduate from the 8A program, succeed, right? High five. It's not always easy, but you know the transition went well. Dan taught me a lot of lessons early on making sure that we think about diversification of revenue. We are a certified hub zone company. We do business and certified in Maryland, D.C. Let's see where I got Maryland, D.C., Illinois, Ohio, New York, Florida, and we have contracts in those particular areas. And we're doing business in a myriad of places on the federal and state and local. Very important to have a mix of revenue. Why is this important to have a mix of revenue? One of the things I wrote down was, since we got in business, Andre and I, in running this company, have survived the dot-com breakup, 9/11, 2.5 wars, the housing crisis, the banking crisis, the recession, government shutdown, and being naive about what in the world we were getting into. All those things you go through over your time are going to happen, right? And then if you don't have a situation and learning from someone and being able to sustain yourself over time, it's just a difficult thing to do. And so these things are going to happen. This happened since 1999, all these particular events. And so for those a little personal, I am a native Washingtonian. I was born in D.C. I went to school in D.C., still live in D.C. But we started ourselves in Prince George's County because my partner said we need to be in the county. I said, okay, great. I went to Archbishop Carroll High School, went to GW undergrad and grad, worked at MCI before we went under WorldCom, worked at Intelsat before we started our business about 15 years ago. As I mentioned, I am the immediate past chair for the DC Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the I'm on the board of directors for the U.S. Black Chambers. I'm on the board of directors for a number of other nonprofits that we believe in. But you'll hear me say something later on about being involved and the importance of that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I got 8 questions or 8 things that I wish somebody would have told us. And I'm gonna ask Andre to come up, and Terrell, you have to leave out earlier, but I may ask you to chime in on one of these. All right, you ready? Number 1, and I need, it is okay to ask for work share from larger companies. You know what that means? That means that if you're negotiating with a large business and they bring you on your team, most of the time, if you're not careful, they'll say, great, when we win, we'll tell you what you get, right? And small businesses are so happy to be on a team. You know what happens after you win? What do you think? Remember I said I come from a Baptist tradition. I need y'all to talk back to me. What happens after you win? If you don't have a great partner, when you go to that celebration party, that's exactly what you did. You went to a celebration party. But you know, you got to realize we're in tight times, right? And there are some great large business partners. But one thing you got to realize is that during tight times, the first thing they want to do is take care of themselves, right? If you're on their team, if you're not negotiating work share, there's a problem. And what I mean by work share, meaning if I'm participating on a proposal, you have the right to ask, and this is a proposal for real dollars, you have the right to ask for how much work am I going to get out of this opportunity. For years, Andre and I used to just be so happy to be on their team. Oh my God, Company X likes us. They really said, we're writing proposals all night. We're doing all-nighters with them. They win. We come in and like, hey, it's time to eat. And they said, first of all, you go to the little kid Thanksgiving table over here, and we will serve you after we eat. And we kind of realized, well, wait a minute, Andre, what are we doing wrong? Why are we doing this? Why don't we, and I think, Deborah, you mentioned that earlier, we have value. Who mentioned that earlier? Remember, we have value. Somebody mentioned, I don't know who it was, but you have value as a small business of who you are. You bring things to the table. You bring solutions. You bring the ability. Oh, that's right. You guys want to track me, right? I'm all out of the camera. Where y'all want me to stand? Right here is good. I can keep, you gonna follow me? I like this. All right, good. So you gotta recognize the value that you bring to the table is worth something. You're gonna spend all night with the proposals. You're gonna work, you're gonna get your people involved. So you need to negotiate that. At this point in time, and I'm not talking about IDIQs or GWACs or BPAs, and I'll talk about that in a second. But right now, we're at a point where if I can't guarantee work share on an opportunity, I don't care how big you are, I don't care how hungry I am, I will not participate because we're gonna give you our best on a proposal, and I gotta eat. I gotta eat, and I'm not going to be used anymore. I'm not gonna get to a situation of debate and switch. I respect the value that we bring to the table, and you need to make sure you respect that value at all. Terrell, do you wanna mention anything to that point before you go?
I concur wholeheartedly. I think sometimes we can undervalue what we bring to the table, and small businesses are agile. Oftentimes they are more in tune with the nuances of the technical offering, whereas larger companies are so bureaucratic and stoic that they can't get to the meat quickly. And you're bringing that value to the table. So whether it's, I want exclusivity in a swim lane, I want a key position in the management structure, I want first, something in writing, in the TA, in attachment A. I want that.
And think about this. Number 2. Now, how many government officials do I have in the room? Because I'm going to represent you guys here. Can you raise your hand if you're government officials? Okay, great. Number 2, please go to the government folks and go beyond the forecast and GovWin. Because no one ever told me not to just say, take this information off the website, go to Dan and say, Dan, the website said you should give me this contract. But that's what people, when you first get into business, you get, input of GovWin, you get the forecast, you go to fedbiz.ops and you get this information. And one of the things we used to do is think, this is all it is. We're great. Now we can write a proposal to this particular specification, not knowing truly what they need, not having built a relationship with anybody at the agency, not looked at the problems and concerns, didn't look at all of the reports that are out there for that particular agency. You're not doing your homework. No one told us when we first got there. Now they're saying it a lot right now. Don't come to us unless you've done your homework. But you gotta do your homework. You gotta make sure that you guys are spending the time investigating, understanding the agency's true needs, so that you're partnering with them. Folks didn't tell us how important that was. And you know what happened? We kept finishing in 2nd and 3rd for the first 3 years, and we saw we were doing better. Man, we're almost there. You know what? That person that was finishing 1, they invested their time in that agency. So the person that was winning the contract over and over and over again was investing the time. We were writing really good proposals, and we were getting practice writing, but we weren't winning anything. And it was really because we didn't go beyond our basic structure of what we needed to do, didn't have somebody mentoring us at first. The government agencies told you should do it. No one told us why. Right? No one ever said, listen, you know what? This agency has some issues, some concerns, or they have something they need to do. And you need to understand the reason behind why they want to do this particular procurement or project. And that was critical because the reason behind it will help you uniquely identify where you want to be. They didn't tell us that. That's why the relationships are so important to come together for mentoring, to come together for collaboration, so you can understand how to do things in nature. Anything else I missed here? No. Number 3, I'm actually going to bring Andre after this one up for a second. All right, so how many folks always want to get to the business owner that owns the procurement? We all want to talk to the person in the government that owns the procurement. One of the people that we always forget is the contract officer. Do not forget the contract officer. So how many people in here are 8A certified? How many people, any HubZone? HubZone, any services able? Women owned? Okay, great. Okay, we got to get some certifications going. Because here's what the contract officers can do. The contract officers at the end of a fiscal year, towards the end of the fiscal year, they know where they're missing. They'll say we're missing some 8As. They'll say we're missing some HubZones, we're missing some women-owned businesses, and each agency has a statutory amount of business they need to do. Guess who knows that number the most? The contract officers. People don't market to them. No one told us we needed to do that effectively until at Department of Veteran Affairs, there was a particular contract officer who just knew they were missing some 8A work. Came to us at the end of the year and said, Antoine, we need somebody here. We've been talking to her all year, not knowing we were marketing to her, and she literally said, let's award this contract to you. I want to give you an opportunity. Just by marketing to these folks, all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, we're on to something at this point. Then we started targeting individuals that bought what we did, and we went back and said, who bought these types of services? What contract officers were a part of that? So who bought the same services that we were doing? And we start marketing to them. Because the contract officers do understand, they're the one ultimately that signs the contract. They sign the contract. So don't forget to market to those individuals because they're very important. They know where the bones are buried. They know the program guys that really want to meet you. They know individually who's missing what. And when they tell you to do something, hey, you know what? Why don't you go meet with this person over here? They're telling you this person may have a need that you need to think about. So do not forget to market to the contract officers. Number 4. So some of the former government employees are going to like this, the ones that are going to retire, because I'm making this recommendation. No one told us the importance of hiring retired government officials. So any government officials that want to retire, please see me after this meeting. So somebody tell me real quick, why is it so important to hire a former government employee? Because they what? They know the process. They know the agency. And now here's the key. I'm usually not talking about the folks that have been the appointees. I'm talking about the career people. I'm talking about those folks that have been there for 20 years. They know where the bones are buried. They know the problems. They know the opportunities. They know potentially the vendors that aren't doing well. I mean, they just know information. And most of the time we go after them, hey, can you get me a contract? Can you get me a contract? That information is better than a contract. You know why? That information is going to keep me eating for a long time. No one told me the value of a retired government official. They didn't tell me that. They just said, go get an SES or a government, appointee, and that the very high person who at the end of the day is going to be there for an administration, and then they're going to go leave. But you get that person that's that GS, 7 through 15, that's been there for a long time, that understands the real mission of that agency, that understands where their pains are and their hurt, their value. No one told us that. So if you can get a hold of one and you really bring them on board, and the beauty of what happens here is that they will teach you how to speak government, and you will teach them how to speak commercial in industry. And that exchange of information is critical because they got to learn our speak. They got to learn what we do. They got to learn why we do it. And we got to learn. They'll say, hey, listen, young lady, this is how this is done, and this is why it's done that way. The IG report said this, or this particular person said this. This is critical information. So you got to think about those individuals. If you can get your hands on them, go ahead. Dan know a whole boatload of them, so don't let Dan sneak out of here beforehand. Andre, you want to talk about this one? We can talk about this together. He don't know what he's doing here, but the value of knowing the FAR. So somebody tell me what the FAR is. Federal Acquisition Regulations. Now, I'm going to take this down to a state and local level also. Every state and local organization has a set of rules in which they do business by. It's critical that you know this. Andre, do you want to start on this one? Terrell, you can, I'll make this a group panel. I'm going to do an instant panel. This is called an instant panel. Okay.
Well, I want to go back to market research, but go
Okay, good. So briefly, the FAR, I call the FAR contract officer speak. That is what most contract officers live by. They really appreciate the fact that they have a warrant, which gives them the right to sign, to bind the government. But they need to do it under specific rules and regulations. I'll give you an example. Antoine talked about us going to school together. We went to school, there's a whole bunch of us, maybe 13 guys hung out together. One of our guys was a good friend of ours, naval officer. He actually came to our office one day and said, hey, you know what, I'm a supply officer, I write contracts, I have a warrant. My warrant allows me, it's an unlimited warrant. I can actually purchase an aircraft carrier. It was like, wow.
We got an aircraft carrier to sell right now.
Then he made the mistake, he went to contracting school. Went to contracting school, came back from contracting school, acted like he was delivered. Oh no, you can't do that. All competitions are fair. Oh, you just turn in the best proposal and the best proposal wins. We knew we weren't getting an aircraft carrier. But we realized from his perspective, he really believed in the FAR. That was his Bible. And he felt that if he followed the Bible, he'd go to heaven, he wouldn't go to jail. But what that taught me was, if I learned his language, I could use that to help me. So if I learned the FAR and said, hey, don't you know, for example, that you can award this contract to an 8A without competition? Here's the FAR clause. Or do you know you can award this to a hub zone company as long as you have 2 or more for competition? Here's the FAR clause. And once you understand that, once you're able to show it to a contracting officer and they see it in the FAR, you'll be able to speak their language, you'll be able to get a lot more things done. So definitely learn the FAR. The FAR is your friend. Even though it's this big, it could really allow you to get some contracts.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you, Antoine, for being so gracious. He mentioned something about market research and FedBiz Ops and input in those tools. If you are finding information that is germane to an opportunity that's 30 or 60 days away, 9 times out of 10, you are way late to the game. In the age of the internet today, we've got LinkedIn, we've got strategic reports, we've got published papers from the government. Read the mission, know your customer's mission, know who. I always want to say, I want to talk to who's going to be on CNN when this goes bad. Because that individual is the real decision maker. The real individual that is up at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, I need to make sure this migration happens. I need to make sure this program is staffed. And finding that out is not necessarily a straight path. You've got to look at who, I always look at who is the key program manager of the incumbent and who's the technical stakeholder, and do they ever share a history together? That starts breadcrumbs on where my key personnel coming from. So you cannot shortchange market research. It is a grueling grind where you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning mining information, but it will serve you because we all have limited B&P budgets. So pick your battles wisely, know what missions you can really support. And one other thing, and I'll give it back to Antoine, as the commoditization happens in certain services, the competitive landscape increases measurably. So when you start to see something was a single award and now it's a multiple award, or now it's a multiple award with 8 different swim lanes and there's no guaranteed, work, the likelihood is that's a commodity and the government really doesn't care where they get it from. Look to go deeper in technical capabilities where you can distinguish yourself, even as a small business, because that's your launching pad for graduation. One other thing, don't be in a rush to get your 8A before you establish your value proposition, because you are starting the clock quicker than what you need to. Wait. It should be, oh, they do great work, they do great scientific programmatic logistics work, and by the way, they're an 8A, and by the way, they're an ANC, or and by the way, they're a hub zone or woman-owned, so forth and so on.
He tapped on one of my, in addendum points, because Andre and I got our 8A way too early. We didn't come from the government sector. We came from the commercial sector in our corporate careers. We started doing government work. What is the first thing somebody told me to do? Get your 8A. So we got our 8A, and thank you, sir. We got our 8A, and we didn't know what to do with it, didn't know anybody, didn't understand how to work it, and it wasn't until 4 years later that we sort of said, oh, so how long is the 8A program? 9 years. So we wasted almost half of it at the time, because no one told us, don't do that. The same information that Terrell just said. Wait till you establish who you are in your business and make sure you understand yourself. Get past performance. Work that subcontracting. We subcontract for what, 2 years, Andre? For a long time. Wear somebody else's badge proud. I'll still wear somebody else's badge proud. But at the end of the day, when you're ready for the programs and the small business programs, they'll be there for you. We've taken advantage of every SBA program that's there. If there's an SBA program that I haven't seen, I'm going to find it to look at what we want to be able to do. So it's critical that we understand that. One other thing on the FAR side that's very interesting, the FAR will keep you out of trouble from OCI. What does OCI stand for? You can say that louder. You're a lawyer. Go ahead.
Organizational conflict of interest.
Yeah, go see him about that issue. He'll be talking about that later. Because what it'll do is really understand where you are and what you can and can't do. You understand the protest rules. There's a lot of information in the FAR. You can't gobble the whole thing. Eventually, you're going to need a lawyer. But what you do want to do is understand the rules, and no one told us this, about who you are and what you do. So at the time we were in 8A, we needed to know all of the 8A rules. When we got our GSA schedule, we needed to understand the schedule buyer. Now that we're a hub zone company, we needed to make sure we understood all the rules for the hub zone. So when I go to if I go to DOD, I'm going to go to DOD and make sure they understand the rule of two. I want to make sure they understand the hub zone program. I want to make sure we got a white paper on our website. We're going to make sure we do what we have to do to educate our potential client. Everybody with me? All right. How many people know what a sources sought is? Okay, a few. Okay, sources sought. What that is when a government agencies, they put out and they said, we're thinking about doing this type of work. And we want to know if there are small businesses that can do this work. And so they'll give you a sample of what the work is, and they'll ask you for your capabilities. They'll say, tell me more about how you can do this. Tell me if you can do this. How would you respond to this particular opportunity? I think almost every government official in this room would say that small businesses do not respond to sources sought enough. Would you say? Can I get an amen? Yes. All right, there we go. And so they would be upset about this. But what somebody did not tell us when we started is that they do work. We have our first contract in cybersecurity when we grew it, when we wanted to competitively look at it, was at HHS. We responded to a sources sought. HHS liked it. They brought us in. It was supposed to be competitive. We did our orals. They liked what they heard so much that they used the 8A program to sole source it to us. I will tell you the recency effect. I was at a meeting yesterday at GSA. We responded to a sources sought about 4 months ago, and GSA wanted to look at our capabilities. They called us in after the sources sought and said, and I was like, this timing works well for my presentation today. We saw the sources sought, we liked what we heard. This is going to be a competition, but we wanted to bring some companies in that we really liked what we saw. And a sources sought, when we look at it from our perspective, is a great marketing tool, right? I'm going to show you the best I got. I'm going to pull stuff together. I'm going to make sure, because this is an opportunity to show that agency what I can do and how I can do it. At best, I got a great marketing opportunity to them, right? I mean, and at worst, at best, I'm in there talking about a capability briefing about an opportunity. You got to make sure you respond. Now, I'm going to add something to this, and so everyone may not like this. Anybody heard of co-opetition?
Yes.
What is co-opetition?
You work with your competition in cooperation.
Yep, you can say that loud. Go ahead and stand up on that one. Go ahead. I come from a testifying side, so can you testify on that?
When you work with your competition in cooperation.
What's your name?
Senior writer.
Where are you from?
Premier accountant.
And so what is that? At the end of the day, if I see that there's an opportunity out there and I'm trying to get it moved into a small business program and it's hub zone related, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to call all the hub zone companies that I know that have capabilities, and I'm going to tell them, hey, this is out on the street, or I'm sorry, they're thinking about making this hub zone or 8A or service disabled veteran. And I'm going to tell them, you need to respond to this. And I want you to respond to this. Now guess what? Why do you think I'm doing that? I can get a piece, but guess what? My competition goes from here to here. So I'll think about this, right? If I'm competing, if it's large business, I'm competing against, I don't know how many millions of companies there are in this country. I'm competing against everybody. If it's small business, I'm competing against a whole boatload of people. If it's 8A, if you're an 8A or women-owned or hub zone, you've just shrunk Shrinking, what's the right word? Who's the linguist in the room? What's the right word? Shrank. You just shrank that opportunity down to something really small. Now, at the end of the day, yes, I'm still competing, but I'm competing against a small number. Literally, you know who does this really well? The service-disabled community, the veterans, which we have a lot of veterans that they do a great job of this because, one, we owe it to them to do so, but two, they work together to make sure that they get things into the service-disabled community and make sure they get set aside for them. I applaud them for that. We learn from them. As a matter of fact, in one State Department opportunity, State Department, the fight was so bad between the service-disabled community and the hub zone, guess what the State Department did? They split it. So they took the opportunity and said, we got enough hub zone companies that we like, we have enough service-disabled veteran that we like, the opportunity was big enough, so they did like Solomon with the baby, say, well, are we gonna split this or not? And they split it. They didn't split it in the Bible, but they split this particular opportunity. And so they do work. Co-opetition does work. It just shrinks my competitive side of what we want to be able to do. I'm on number 7. How much time do I have, by the way? 5 minutes. Oh, y'all got to delay something else. I'm on a roll. All right. There's been a schedule update. I'll let you guys know in a little bit. Join boards. Now, obviously, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that Andre and I are here today. But let me tell you, let me be honest with you, and I'll make it quick. Boards. Dan, go ahead and say.
Associations of boards.
You know why? Guess what? When I was trying to get meetings a few years ago with certain individuals as president of Enlightened, it was like, oh yeah, I'll kind of meet with you. Good. Yeah, okay. When I became the chair of the DC Chamber of Commerce, all of a sudden, I was different. And I'm like, looked in the mirror. Why are you meeting with me now? Because somebody else said that you were worthy of a position that was beyond the one you created for yourself. Get your ego out the way. And really, I'm like, I'm the same person. I've got an attitude problem walking into a room like, well, all of a sudden, I'm meeting with senators because they want to know certain issues with DC that was going on. And as the chair of the DC Chamber of Commerce, that door was open for me. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I'm like, and Dan, what's wrong, Dan? I mean, it's true, right?
It's true.
It's true. It's amazing. You're the same person, dressing in the same clothes, but they want to meet you now. And you're like, okay, this all right. Yes, Senator, yeah, I understand you want to meet me. How you doing? You know, okay. But the beauty of this is that it gives you the ability to impact people in a way that's extraordinary when all of a sudden they call you to testify. So when there was a government shutdown, the Small Business Senate Committee asked me to come in and speak from a small business perspective and as chair of the DC Chamber of Commerce. Because DC in particular was impacted because they didn't want us to use our own money. And so all of a sudden I'm building relationships with senators, not because I'm president of Enlightened, because I was on a board that was extremely important at that point. And so the value of the boards is critical. The other thing I will mention is when you're on boards and associations, all of a sudden I'm next to an individual who's really much more important than me. So I'll give you an example of years ago when I first joined the board, I met Marie Johns. If you don't know, she was the former deputy administrator of SBA. At the time, Marie was probably president of Verizon at the time, and she was like a legend, if anybody knows who Marie is. All of a sudden, I'm next to Marie Johns, and we're working on projects together on a committee. And then when she runs for mayor of the city, and then all of a sudden she's asking me, hey, Antoine, can you help me with my law enforcement policy? Because we did a lot of work with law enforcement systems. And then, you know, she didn't, and when she got appointed to SBA, guess all of a sudden who was able to go meet the president and do certain things. Why? Because Marie and I had become friends. She knew I was somebody that I could count on. So when there was something needed in the White House, Marie says, I got the small business you want to meet. And so I'm meeting the president and in awe, and I'm like, this dude is smooth. You know, and I'm like, oh man, I ain't trying to be impressed with no guy, but I was like, you real smooth here. But it was kind of cool to see the president because of who Marie was. Would that have happened if I wasn't next to Marie? No. But it's just on the board because all of a sudden it ceases to become really big person who's head of an organization in the county, for example, Safeway. What are some of the large businesses you guys have on your board?
Right, so Safeway, Giant, all the commercial, we have a lot of commercial in in the county. One of the big things about the county is, it's very different in Washington, D.C., is when you're in charge of the business community in Washington, D.C., there's automatically a nexus to the political structure. Whatever, there's a strong connection. In the county, it's not so much. The difference between the business and the political structure is very wide. But like you said, you know, there's a minimum wage that came up. People wanted input from the business, so they said, you know, Mr. Rogers, I don't know what you do in your daytime, but you're head of the chamber, you need to come down and testify. So all of a sudden, I begin to have those relationships with the political structure here in the county. Not because I run this great company, it's because I happen to be in charge of the Chamber of Commerce. So just like Antoine was saying, those relationships can be formed by joining the organizations, by joining associations, and becoming more involved outside of the work that we've got to do 12 hours a day.
And it was interesting because, and it tells you it's 12, let me say 14. Can I get 14 hours? Can I get 15? I heard some people over here, it's like 12. You ain't working that hard, Andre. You done made it now, so all you got is 12.
The other 12, I'm chair of the chamber.
Okay, woo! Well, you saved that one well, didn't you? Now, it was interesting because DC and Prince George's on opposite sides, and so Andre and I are arguing in our office about what DC and Prince George's should do. But, you know, we compromised somewhere in there, didn't we? Last question was, and I'm going to shape this around dating, because I figured I'd have fun with this one. You have to treat, when you're going after business, whether it's state and local, we talked about this a few minutes ago, whether it's state and local, federal, your customer like you're dating. So let's go back. I wish I had some music. I would really put the music, some soft music. Can you sing? No, you're not going to sing on this? Okay, good. I told Lauren she's going to have to sing here. So we'll go back to days when you were dating, you first went on those first dates. It was really cool. You brought flowers. You were nice. You know, if you were a guy, you let them have extra cheese on the sandwich. You didn't say cut the cheese, right? You really gave what you had when you first started dating, right? I mean, now you may say, why you know that cheese now? But you know, when you first start dating, you really are taking care of that person. You gotta treat your customer like that. And we don't do that at small business. No one told me to treat every customer you have like it's your first date every time, right? So if you go back and then see, so you gotta make sure, I have some things. You gotta call often, you know, you gotta provide new things every now and then. You gotta keep it fresh, right? You gotta make sure new ideas, just don't take the person on the same date every time. They're like, we going to Haynes Point again? Come on, dude. How many times we gonna go down Haynes Point? Right? I'm sorry, it's a DC reference. What should I use? I'm sorry, I use a DC. What's it? National Harbor. I am tired of going to catch up at National Harbor. We gotta go somewhere else. Just like your customer, I'm sorry, am I in trouble, Dan? Okay, good, Dan. You gotta make sure you take care of your customer. You gotta make sure you're spending time with them. You gotta make sure, interesting enough is that, and Andre and I made this mistake, when we first got, we got a customer, they like us. And guess what happened? Just like, you know, you're dating, a nice little relationship, you look over and say, ooh, she nice. I'll be right back. Somebody else take care of her real quick. And we stopped paying attention to the customer that we were focused on for the new customer, right? And it's like the new friend, oh, she's just my friend, oh, he's just my friend, he just there for me, you know, no. We gotta make sure that you take care of your customers. Because one of the things we kept doing, Andre and I could not figure out why we weren't growing. Like, why aren't we growing? Lisa was helping us reporting. Lisa, why aren't we growing? And we realized all we were doing was replacing revenue. We would leave one customer and like not take care of them and then go to a new next customer, send out a press release. I called Dan, we got a new customer. Dan was like, great, what happened to your old customer? Right? Because we weren't taking care of home. We were not taking care of home. It wasn't until we realized where our growth was coming, you got to take care of home. Now, in using this analogy, it does break down on faithfulness. You can date multiple government agencies. It's okay. You can do it as long as you know you take care of home. Right? Say again? As long as you keep the money separate. There you go. She know about that one. Because part of it, but here's the key thing. Make sure that one thing that we found out, that's why I said we talked about this, Deborah. One thing we found out is if you're ready to grow, if taking on a new customer causes you to fail somebody else. And when you get stretched too thin, that's a problem. That means you're not teaming enough. That means you're not sharing enough. You're not collaborating enough. You're not doing what you need to do to ensure it's okay to partner. And once we realize, it's like, wait a minute, if we go after this customer by ourselves alone, it's stretching us too thin. And every time, your indication that you're stretched too far is your quality is dropping. You can't deliver the service. You can't get to the customer on time. You're not calling back. You're not responding. Like that first date, all of a sudden you call, and we used to call it back in the day, Johnny Carson time. I can only call you when Arsenio Hall's on, right? You know there's a problem if you can't give your customer prime time. And you know you're stretched too thin. So if you notice you have a quality problems as you grow, make sure you manage that. That's what partnership's about. You gotta make sure you do that. And so if you no one told us that. It took us years to figure that out. Andre, you wanna add anything to that at all? I got thumbs up, I know I gotta cancel it. You know what, I know time's up, right? And I can't do that new announcement. My staff is in charge of me. Hey, thank you guys so much. I had a good time. Really appreciate that. Other than that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Rogers.